Lester Holt. Have a good night, everyone.
Right now on NBC Connecticut.
Chaos at the Capitol.
I pray that America never suffers such a dark day again.
Lawmakers return to work hours after rioters stormed the building, clashing with police.
Ordering us not just to evacuate, but to evacuate, down low because they were afraid that that somebody might have been armed out there.
And sending members of Congress running for cover. From local reaction.
This is an extraordinary event.
To what happens next. We have team coverage right now.
NBC Connecticut News starts now.
It's a much quieter scene at the Capitol tonight after riots brought things to a standstill for hours. You're looking live at the Senate floor where lawmakers have resumed counting Electoral College votes. Good evening. I'm Keisha Grant.
And I'm Mike Heideck. Take a look at what it looked like earlier today. The mob that busted into the building this afternoon. One woman was shot and killed. Others were injured. A curfew is now in place in our nation's capital. And Facebook and Twitter and Instagram have all frozen President Trump's accounts.
NBC's Alice Barr joins us live in Washington, D.C. with much more on the chaos at the U.S. Capitol. Alice.
Good evening. Rioters came to the Capitol today looking for a fight after rallying with and being urged on by President Trump. The nation's capital on lockdown tonight, under curfew, hours after the U.S. Capitol and democracy itself came under siege. One person was fatally shot in 3 hours of chaos after a mob of supporters of President Trump and his false claims about the election surrounded and then stormed the Capitol. The drama unfolded this afternoon as lawmakers had just begun the traditional process of counting electoral votes, confirming Joe Biden's victory as the next president. Vice President Mike Pence and members of the House and Senate forced to take cover as rioters rushed past heavily armed officers, in many cases virtually unchallenged. Some made their way into the well of the House and the Senate, defiantly standing their ground in a place where elected officials had been doing their work only minutes earlier. One lawmaker likened it to crashing the gate of the People's House. President-elect Biden had harsher words.
It's not protest. It's insurrection.
President Trump said little to defuse the powder keg, but after lawmakers returned to count the votes, Vice President Pence led several Republicans in condemning the mob.
To those who wreaked havoc in our Capitol today, you did not win.
They tried to disrupt our democracy. They failed.
An unforgettable day on Capitol Hill and a dark one in this nation's history. The police officers who guard the Capitol are facing harsh questions and criticism tonight over why they weren't better prepared and allowed a mob to take over what is supposed to be one of the most secure buildings in the world. In Washington, I'm Alice Barr. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Alice. Congressman Jim Himes was in the House chamber sitting in the balcony with Representative Rosa DeLauro when all of this unfolded today. In a phone interview tonight, I asked him to describe his harrowing afternoon. Congressman Himes, describe where you were and what it was like when the protesters breached the Capitol.
Over the course of about 15 minutes, it went from your pretty standard issue debate on the floor of the House of Representatives to police officers coming in, to doors being slammed closed, to weapons being drawn, and them ordering us not just to evacuate, but to evacuate, down low because they were afraid that that somebody might have been armed out there.
And as they ducked for cover, the members of Congress in the chamber were told to look under the seats and grab gas masks that are being stored there after being told by Capitol Police there could be tear gas in the rotunda. There wasn't, but there was plenty of fear and confusion.
I'd seen the protesters around, and they weren't heavily armed, and therefore it was a little confusing that they managed to penetrate the Capitol. I mean, the Capitol Police are as heavily armed as they come. There was 5 minutes of very real anxiety when you're standing to a police officer who's training his his weapon at a door. That is not a normal day-to-day experience.
Himes says about 100 members of Congress and 75 staffers were evacuated to a very large, secure conference room, a plan that kept them all safe, but certainly changed them forever after this experience.
And I've spent my entire political career working really hard to reach out to the other side. I really believe that's important. But honestly, the ones who have been wrapped up and who stoked the flames that burst into the open today, it's just hard to imagine. These are people who don't really care about the preservation of our democracy and the orderly transfer of power. And I'm gonna have to do a lot of work to ever get back into the headspace of working with some of these people again.
Now, as you heard by his tone of voice, Congressman Himes was remarkably calm considering the circumstances. He told me Congress was committed to getting the people's business done, even if it takes all night.
Mike, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro was also there. She released this statement, writing in part, January 6 will go down as a dark day in United States history, but our democracy will prevail over the violent mob that ransacked our Capitol. Congressman Joe Courtney was in a separate office building across the street when the Capitol was breached. He described it as a disturbing and sad day for our country, but he says he's committed. He'll stay tonight as long as it takes to finish the vote count.
Distressing time, but in some ways, I mean, I think it really, I think for all of us, we've got to just dig deeper and, really understand that oath we just took Sunday night is not just window dressing or, for show. It's really a solemn duty that we all have to live up to the Constitution's requirements.
Courtney adds they are powering through the night and will not allow what happened today to sidetrack their work.
Now, because of social distancing, there were only a small number of congresswomen and senators allowed in the Capitol today. Congressman Courtney was in his office building, which is in the Rayburn building on the top left of your screen, well away from the riots on the Capitol steps and inside the Capitol. Congressman Larson is in the Longworth building, which is right below that. Congressional buildings, the office buildings, were built because of the limited space inside the Capitol. The House office buildings are along Independence Avenue. The Senate buildings are on Constitution.
It's as serious as you can get outside of a significant terrorist event.
Tonight, law enforcement agencies remain on high alert.
We're hearing from a former FBI special agent about the extraordinary events today, and we're also getting an historical perspective on how this all unfolded. NBC Connecticut's Jamie Ratliff continues our team coverage.
The Capitol is probably one of the most secure facilities in our country. The Capitol Police are very well trained.
But today, that secure building was breached, and that well-trained force in need of backup, calling in multiple agencies, including the FBI. Retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Michael Clark says it's incredibly rare for that to happen, emphasizing the seriousness of what unfolded in D.C. He says Capitol Police and agencies like the FBI have trained together for possibilities like what happened today, and that the question comes down to how much force should be used.
You train to keep people out of the building. Once they breach that perimeter, it becomes a much more difficult task.
ECSU Associate Professor of History Thomas Balcerski says in the more than 100 years of Congress affirming the presidential election, they've never had to stop proceedings to deal with an external event.
I believe that what we saw today was a test that we passed, that the democratic process continues to work. I think that those who would try to stop the democratic process are an extreme minority, and they represent extreme views in this country.
Balcerski says the political fallout could be within the Republican Party itself, that this could cause even greater splits, and many will be watching to see if it creates a permanent fissure. Despite today's events, Balcerski says there's room for optimism, that this delayed but did not stop the process.
America is resilient and it endures. In the sense that we need to do better, I think it's fairly obvious. What happened today cannot and should not happen again. And the disruption that was posed by this mob today will not be tolerated.
Jamie Ratliff, NBC Connecticut News.
Now, this is not the first time the U.S. Capitol building has become a target in times of disagreement and unrest in our country. Back in 1814, before the Capitol was even finished, British troops attacked the Capitol during the War of 1812, and they actually used books from the Library of Congress to fuel a fire there. Then in 1915, German sympathizer detonated a bomb in the Senate reception room to protest America's sympathies toward Great Britain in World War I. And in 1954, Puerto Rican nationalists got into the Capitol and used smuggled weapons to carry out a shooting. In both 1971 and 1983, explosives were set off in the Capitol in protest of American foreign policy.
So many people were stunned as they watched history unfold at the U.S. Capitol.
And what happens next? There are still so many questions on where we go from here. NBC Connecticut's Matt Austin has reaction tonight from New Haven.
It's time for us to stand together, love on one another.
Tonight in New Haven, city and community leaders speaking out after an unsettling day for many Americans.
I watched what happened with my children, and I was embarrassed, I was upset, I was frustrated. I had so many emotions.
Shocking images of the takeover of the U.S. Capitol playing out on TV and online. And it came soon after people started to learn the results of an important election to decide 2 U.S. Senate seats from Georgia and control of the Senate itself.
It was a day of celebration that I thought was going to be all day. That quickly turned to sadness, anger, and I really was shook by what I saw today in our country.
Many here raised concerns about what they witnessed, including why more was not done earlier to stop the pro-Trump rioters.
Where was the military-grade riot gear that was used on the peaceful protesters for Black Lives Matter? Where was the Capitol Police, the National Guard?
Though amidst the worries, there was still hope for the nation.
We're in America, we're in the United States, where we should be better and we should be able to get together in unity and make our country what it is, the best country in the world.
Matt Austin, NBC, Connecticut News.
And here at home, outside our state capitol, hundreds of people made their voices heard in a mostly peaceful protest as our lawmakers got back to work. For the first time in Connecticut's history, lawmakers had to be sworn in outside, and they televised their speeches from inside the Capitol. This was all because of COVID, of course. The new Speaker of the House, Matt Ritter, was sworn in by his father, who was once the Speaker himself back in the 1990s. And Republican Vincent Candelora was sworn in as Minority Leader. He says he'll work with Ritter to make sure this new virtual session is open to the public, even if the state Capitol building is not.
NBC Connecticut's Kristen Johnson has reaction to the governor's State of the State address.
Calling today the beginning of Connecticut's comeback story, Governor Ned Lamont painted an optimistic vision of the state while outlining some familiar priorities for the upcoming session.
Today, I don't want our state to be defined by a COVID crisis. Instead, I want this to be the year we change the narrative of Connecticut.
The governor paused early in his pre-taped State of the State address for a moment of silence in honor of the 6,000 in Connecticut who've lost their lives to COVID. Much of the governor's speech focused on the state's response to the coronavirus, but he also looked ahead to some longstanding issues that have ended in a stalemate in sessions past.
Sports betting, internet gaming, legalized marijuana, they're all happening all around us. Let's not surrender these opportunities to out-of-state markets, or even worse, to underground markets.
The Senate's top Republican countered that lawmakers should be focused on the health of the economy.
We're going through a pandemic. Public health and, to look at recreational marijuana, like that's their most important focus, knowing that Connecticut families are struggling.
While lawmakers returned to business both in person and virtually inside the Capitol, outside, hundreds lined up in protest.
We're here to protect our rights, and I'm glad that there's this many people here. It's about time.
Senate Majority Leader Bob Duff confirmed Marnie Palladino's fear that the religious exemption for vaccines would likely be back on the agenda this session.
We all have to be judicious as to what we're thinking about doing, but that doesn't mean we shy away from some of the issues that might be a little controversial, but are still very, very important.
With the session going virtual, some say issues like that should be put on the back burner until public hearings can be held in person again.
We should limit what we do to only those things that are absolutely necessary and not look to do things that may marginalize those individuals that, quite frankly, don't have the connectivity that depend on government.
Next month, the governor will release his 2-year budget, which will lay out how he plans to pay for his priorities and shore up the state's $640 million budget deficit. At the state capitol, Kristen Johnson, NBC Connecticut News.
Still ahead tonight, our coverage of the Capitol Hill riots continues with a look from the latest from the Senate floor, as well as how the world is reacting.
And a story we all need on a dark day, the special surprise for a young man with a big heart in South Windsor.
And our quiet forecast continues, but how long will the nice weather stick around for? I'll break down some changes in my exclusive 10-day forecast.
This is NBC Connecticut News.
Welcome back. We continue to follow the developments in our nation's capital. You're looking live in Washington, D.C. Senator Blumenthal just got off the floor. Lawmakers are continuing their count of the electoral votes to certify them. As you know, the process was halted earlier today after rioters broke through doors and busted through windows. Capitol Police drew their weapons at one barricaded door from inside the House, although protesters eventually breached both chambers.
Tonight, the world is watching. Several leaders overseas expressing shock over what unfolded at the U.S. Capitol today. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson calling it disgraceful. The High Representative of the European Union wrote American democracy appeared to be under siege, and Italy's Prime Minister called it an attack to the freedom of the American people. Stay with NBC Connecticut and NBC News for continuing coverage from Washington. We'll keep an eye on the situation overnight and bring you the latest tomorrow morning at 4:30. You can also get updates anytime online and on the NBC Connecticut app.
Now tonight to the latest coronavirus numbers here in Connecticut. The state's positivity rate is up once again to 8.5% after more than 2,400 new COVID-19 cases. Hospitalizations have gone down by 10. 38 more people have died. Two young men are facing charges tonight after police say they tried to escape an arrest by stealing a police car. Officers say they were trying to stop them near the exit of 43, the off-ramp on I-95 in West Haven. They were in what they believed was a stolen car. The teens were eventually stopped at the intersection of Campbell Avenue and West Spring Street. That's when the driver took off running, and the passenger ended up getting into a police car and then taking off. Ended up hitting several police officers before crashing into that cemetery fence.
I've seen, a bunch of kids running around stealing cars nowadays. I would never take a cop car, though.
Now, two officers were taken to the hospital. Police tell us they're expected to be okay.
In Hartford, the investigation continues after a member of a federal task force shot and killed a person this morning. Police tell NBC Connecticut the FBI's Safe Streets Task Force was arresting a suspect on Infield Street when someone shot at them. Officers returned fire. State police say that person died at the hospital.
The task force itself was comprised to investigate some of the more serious crimes that are happening in and around the city of Hartford. As I mentioned earlier, the task force itself is comprised of members from various local police departments, state police, as well as the FBI.
State police would not say if the shots were fired by a federal agent or an officer from another local department. The state's attorney is investigating. We've got an update now on a story we brought you last night at 11. We're learning much more about the arrest of two Norwalk police officers caught at a hotel while on duty. According to court documents, officers Michael DeMeglio and Sarah Lodano were drinking together before work and continued drinking in the police station parking lot while on the clock. Investigators found Lodano's police SUV had been parked for 4 hours instead of responding to calls. The officers were eventually found in a hotel room.
Now, NBC Connecticut's first alert weather. Connecticut's most accurate forecast, certified by Weather Rate.
Well, after a cloudy start to the day, it ended up being a really nice afternoon with plenty of sunshine, and that blue sky trend will continue as we head through the rest of the week. Let's start you off with a live look outside in New Haven. All is calm and quiet out there. The trees still looking beautiful on the green. Live First Alert Doppler scanning dry skies across the state. We'll give you a wider perspective of the region, and you can see up towards Maine. We do have a few snow showers that are moving through. I think that will sink down into portions of eastern Massachusetts. I don't think we see any snow overnight in Connecticut. I won't totally rule it out, but I think we stay mainly clear as we head through the overnight hours and really quiet for the next several days. We'll take you through First Alert Future Radar all the way into next week, because that is looking like our next chance for some rain and possibly some wintry weather. So tomorrow, nice and quiet. That storm that brought us all the clouds today will continue to pull away to the east. As we head towards the weekend, we watch one storm pass well to our south. I do think it comes close enough to southern New England that we see some clouds, especially around Saturday, but still some sunshine as we head towards the weekend. And then that storm flies out to sea. But as we head towards next week, starts off nice and quiet Monday and Tuesday, but then you see that other storm down in the southeast. That's going to come closer to Connecticut and have the potential to bring us some rain and possibly some wintry weather by Wednesday. There is still a lot to fine tune as it is a week away, but we'll keep a close eye on that storm system as we head towards next week. But for tonight, partly cloudy, cold overnight. Temperatures fall back into the mid to upper 20s across the state. A few hill towns in the mid to low 20s for tomorrow morning. So a chilly start to Thursday, but we'll see temperatures climb back into the low 40s throughout the afternoon, a little above average. Should be right around 35 degrees for this time of the year, but we'll stay in the low 40s for tomorrow with nice sunshine after a few clouds early in the morning. Here's a look at the 10-day forecast. You can see that really nice quiet stretch of weather. Really not a whole lot going on in the weather department. That storm that's well to our south towards the weekend will bring in just a few clouds, but still plenty of sunshine. Temperatures in the mid to upper 30s both Saturday and Sunday. As we look ahead to next week, Wednesday will be when we watch that storm nearby. Could see a little bit more wintry weather towards the following weekend, but that's the end of the 10-day forecast, so not too concerned about that quite yet. Along the shoreline, temperatures stay in the low 40s for Thursday and Friday, upper 30s for Saturday with just a few more clouds in the forecast, and then temperatures look to stay above average as we head towards next week as well. Mike and Keisha, send things back to you.
All right, Caitlin, thank you. Tomorrow will be day 2 of our Connecting You to Joy Season of Giving blood drive. NBC Connecticut and Telemundo Connecticut are teaming up with the American Red Cross and inviting you to give back to your community by donating blood. Those donations are critical to so many in Connecticut, including the Lambert family. Their 6-year-old son, Brendan, depends on it to treat an immune disorder, and they are grateful for every donation.
So prior to starting these treatments, he had frequent visits to the ER, needed lots of different types of medications. He's been hospitalized for things as simple as like falling in the yard where a cut has turned to a major infection for him.
Ooh. You can still make an appointment to donate blood tomorrow at either Dunkin' Donuts Park in Hartford or West Hartford Town Hall.
We have seen just how hard it is to avoid COVID shutdowns when it comes to college sports. And yes, a couple of more teams in Connecticut are hitting the pause button now. Matt Finkel is here with a look ahead to sports tonight. Matt?
Yeah, Mike, CCSU women's basketball and UConn men's hockey are putting things on hold due to positive COVID-19 tests. Plus, for the second day in a row, another change coming to the UConn women's basketball schedule. I've got those details after the break.
Best internet service provider, according to speedtest.net.
UConn men's hockey has paused all team activities after a member of the program tested positive for COVID-19. The Huskies were scheduled to play Northeastern tomorrow and then again on Saturday. Those games have been postponed. Team activities will remain on hold until contact tracing and more testing can be completed. Sacred Heart men's hockey playing its first game since December 15th, and it was a good one. Pioneers up a goal late, but the Falcons scored with 3 seconds left to tie the game. So we go to overtime. Braden Tuck wins it for Sacred Heart, a great way to return from a long layoff. To the hardwood, CCSU women's basketball is on pause because of a positive COVID-19 test. They were set to return to play tomorrow for the first time since December 20th, but now their next 3 games are postponed. Tomorrow and Friday against Bryant and January 14th against Sacred Heart. Another blow for the UConn women. Their January 13th game against Xavier is postponed. Xavier announced a pause to team activities due to contact tracing. This comes just a day after the Huskies game against Baylor, set for tomorrow, was canceled because of a positive test for Baylor's head coach. The UConn men rallied from an 18-point deficit last night to beat Marquette on the road. It's a sign of just how far this program has come in year 3 under Dan Hurley. A character-building win in which they overcame a rough first half and an injury to James Bouknight. A couple of seniors led the comeback. Isaiah Whaley's double-double provided a spark, and Tyler Polley could not miss down the stretch on his way to a career-high 23 points, all in the second half.
That's what I feel like tonight. Every time I touch the ball in the second half, I'm like, it's going in when I shoot it.
Tyler, since Christmas break, has really been a different guy.
Be a part of it with him was just something amazing. We've been through a lot here since we've been at UConn, so it was something special. It felt special.
Great finish in the NBA tonight between the Celtics and Heat, all tied up at 105. Peyton Pritchard on the follow, 0.2 of a second left on the clock. Celtics win their third in a row, 107-105. The Knicks also picked up their third victory in a row tonight. That's your look at sports. We'll be right back.
We have a quick breaking update from the Capitol tonight. 4 people we heard have died. The AP is reporting this. 4 Trump supporters. One that was in the Capitol was shot. 3 were medical emergencies. And, you know, tonight, this has been a stressful, tumultuous day for all of us. And we wanted to try to end this newscast just for a moment on something that could put a smile on your face.
Absolutely. Look at that, all of the lights and the sirens, all to celebrate a beloved member of the South Windsor community. Brendan is his name, and he is celebrating his 23rd birthday today. Brendan has Down syndrome, and his family, well, they wanted to make sure he got a special celebration. Police cars and fire trucks took part in this car parade right outside of his house to make sure he could feel the love. And what a beautiful celebration there. Happy birthday, Brendan.
Yeah, happy birthday, Brendan.
Thanks for joining us.
Good night, everybody.